Throughout her career in the music industry, Joni Mitchell has often found herself underestimated and unfairly compared to others with whom she shares little in common. True to her bold and unapologetic nature, Mitchell has never been one to mince words. Unlike many legendary artists who take a more diplomatic approach, she's been refreshingly blunt in her critiques, even when it comes to some of the most celebrated figures in music. She hasn't hesitated to label certain artists as fake, shallow, or simply talentless. Recalling her first meeting with John Lennon, she once quoted him saying, "Oh, it's all a product of overeducation," during his final year in Los Angeles. From rock icons to pop sensations, these are 5 musicians Joni Mitchell has publicly disapproved of, and the reasons why. Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift has long expressed admiration for Mitchell, citing her as a major influence, particularly regarding songwriting that is personal and narrative in style. Like Mitchell, Swift transitioned from her original genre, country, to become a dominant force in pop music, undergoing a notable artistic transformation. Despite this, Mitchell has shown little appreciation for Swift's musical evolution. Her comment on Swift was dismissive and sharp. "I don't know what her music sounds like, but if she's going to sing and play me, good luck." This biting remark came as a reaction to the planned biopic Girls Like Us, based on Sheila Weller's book, which was set to feature Swift portraying a young Joni Mitchell. The film aimed to explore the lives of 3 influential female singer-songwriters: Mitchell, Carole King, and Carly Simon. Although Swift was reportedly excited about the opportunity, Mitchell completely rejected the project, famously saying, "I squashed that. I told the producer, all you've got is a girl with high cheekbones." Her response wasn't just a critique of Swift's ability to play her. It came across as a rejection of her entire artistic persona. At first glance, this might seem needlessly cruel, especially given Swift's open admiration for Mitchell. However, the comment reveals something deeper: Mitchell's broader disillusionment with today's music scene. While many veteran artists celebrate younger musicians as part of their legacy, Mitchell has consistently criticized contemporary music for its lack of substance, originality, and genuine emotion. Her dismissal of Swift points to her view that today's pop world prioritizes image and marketability over true artistry. Whether or not Mitchell genuinely hasn't heard Swift's music is debatable, but the statement underscores her disinterest in mainstream pop. In contrast to peers like Bob Dylan, who has acknowledged the talents of newer generations, Mitchell is vocal about her dissatisfaction with the direction the industry has taken, favoring flashy production over meaningful lyrics. Her refusal to recognize Swift's songs may be less about personal dislike and more about what Swift represents in a commercialized music world. Despite this, Swift's body of work clearly reflects Mitchell's influence. Tracks like All Too Well, The Archer, and Marjorie showcase deeply emotional storytelling and poetic writing, hallmarks of Mitchell's style. Even Swift's bold decision to re-record her albums in a bid to reclaim artistic ownership echoes Mitchell's own rebellious spirit and resistance to industry control. It could be argued that Mitchell's critique is unfair, especially considering that Swift has challenged many of the same systemic issues in the industry. Her battle for artistic autonomy, exploration of indie folk elements in folklore and evermore, and continued reinvention all indicate a level of depth that one might expect Mitchell to appreciate. Still, her criticism appears less personal and more symbolic, a rejection not of Swift alone, but of a commercial system that elevates brand over artistry. Judy Collins. While Bob Dylan might be the most famous name linked with Mitchell's musical critiques, the inclusion of Judy Collins on that list comes as more of a surprise. What makes their tension especially intriguing is that Collins played a key role in bringing Mitchell's work into the public eye. In 1967, Collins recorded Both Sides Now, a song written by Mitchell, and it became a major success, reaching number 3 on the US charts and garnering widespread acclaim. This recognition significantly boosted Mitchell's reputation as a songwriter. However, Mitchell's response to Collins's version has always been complicated. Rather than expressing gratitude, she remained cool and even resentful. In interviews, Collins has been candid about the tension, remarking, "I remember hearing something about Joni not liking my version of the song, but I couldn't care less." To Collins, Mitchell's dissatisfaction seemed petty, especially given the exposure the song received. For Mitchell, though, the problem wasn't simply artistic. It was personal. During that time, many listeners assumed Both Sides Now was a Collins original, overshadowing Mitchell's authorship. Considering how personal and introspective Mitchell's work tends to be, such misattribution may have felt like a violation. Collins, however, had little patience for these sentiments, once speculating that Mitchell was just a little jealous, and bluntly stating that Mitchell should be saying, thank you, God." The rift between the two artists speaks to a fundamental divide. Collins, pragmatic and focused on commercial success, views success as a net positive. Mitchell, on the other hand, has always been fiercely protective of her creative integrity. She has long been critical of the industry's obsession with mass appeal, and is deeply wary of others interpreting her work in ways that could dilute its original meaning. This protectiveness is not new. Throughout her career, Mitchell has shown a strong resistance to industry norms and a reluctance to compromise for the sake of broader appeal. Many artists would welcome having their songs covered by prominent performers, but Mitchell tends to see these versions as potential threats to the emotional core of her music. Her discomfort with Collins's interpretation of Both Sides Now is part of this ongoing concern, where popular versions of her work threaten to overshadow or misrepresent her voice. John Lennon. The meeting between Joni Mitchell and John Lennon took place during a turbulent time in his life, his so-called lost weekend in Los Angeles. A period between 1973 and 1975 marked by excessive drinking, reckless behavior, and separation from Yoko Ono. This era saw Lennon frequently partying with the likes of Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon, and it was in the midst of this chaos that he and Mitchell first crossed paths. Their interaction, however, was far from friendly. Mitchell later recalled the encounter with barely veiled disdain, describing an immediate friction between their personalities. She noted a kind of cultural divide, saying, "When I met John Lennon, it was during his lost year in LA," implying a lack of impression. Her observations went further, as she pointed out what she perceived as Lennon's underlying insecurity. Specifically, a fear common among working-class individuals toward those from a more intellectual or artistic middle-class background. In Mitchell's view, Lennon's abrasiveness and defensiveness were signs of that insecurity. Although he had achieved unparalleled success with the Beatles, Lennon never seemed to shake off the chip on his shoulder about his Liverpool roots. His sarcasm and occasional cruelty could be seen as a way of asserting dominance in spaces where he might have felt inferior or unwelcome. While Mitchell didn't grow up wealthy herself, she was raised in a middle-class home in Saskatchewan, Canada. She was seen as part of a more refined and introspective artistic community. Her music, steeped in poetic storytelling and emotional depth, stood in contrast to Lennon's more aggressive, straightforward rock and roll sensibilities. Their artistic philosophies were just as different as their upbringings. Mitchell's music focused on intricacy and personal reflection, while Lennon's style leaned more toward raw, politically charged anthems and experimental pop. These differences likely deepened the divide between them, creating an atmosphere of mutual discomfort and misunderstanding. John Lennon's often unfiltered and brutally honest lyrics stood in contrast to those of other musical revolutionaries. Though he and Joni Mitchell were each groundbreaking in their own right, the paths they took in their creative journeys couldn't have been more different. When they met, it wasn't just a simple crossing of paths. It was a clash of ideologies, upbringings, and artistic sensibilities. During his infamous Lost Weekend phase, Lennon was known for being confrontational and erratic. If he was in one of his aggressive moods, it's not hard to envision that he and Mitchell didn't exactly get along. Mitchell, who has always spoken her mind without apology or sugarcoating, likely didn't hesitate to challenge Lennon on his behavior or outlook. Considering Lennon's own love for sarcasm and pushing boundaries, it's reasonable to assume their exchange was filled with verbal jabs, some playful, others pointed. There was likely a mutual undercurrent of distrust or skepticism in the air. The idea that Lennon may have had lingering insecurities about the middle-class intellectual elite isn't far-fetched. Though undeniably brilliant, he often reacted with disdain to those who seemed to wield intellect like a weapon of superiority. His contentious interactions with people like Paul McCartney, known for his more refined and diplomatic communication style, or the erudite Bob Dylan, point to Lennon's sensitivity about being viewed as less cultured or less sophisticated. Mitchell's comments about class conflict may have struck a nerve that Lennon deeply felt but rarely admitted. If he had lived long enough to hear her opinions, it's easy to picture his response. True to form, he might have fired back with a sharp quip or mocking remark. Or, considering the more introspective and calmer version of himself he evolved into during his later years, perhaps he would have conceded that there was some truth in her critique. By the late 1970s, Lennon had withdrawn from the public spotlight, choosing a quieter life with Yoko Ono and their son Sean, far removed from the madness of fame. In his final interviews, he looked back on his life with surprising self-awareness, hinting at a maturity that may have made him more open to criticism. Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, two titans of modern songwriting, each carved an undeniable legacy in music and cultural history. Initially, they seemed like natural allies. Both emerged from the 1960s folk movement, pushed lyrical boundaries, and embodied the era's rebellious spirit. Yet despite these similarities, Mitchell's admiration for Dylan eventually turned into fierce criticism, creating one of the most surprising rivalries in the music industry. Early in her career, Mitchell admitted that Dylan had a profound effect on her development as an artist. His 1965 song, Positively 4th Street, struck her as a turning point. It showed that songwriting could be raw, deeply personal, and unconstrained by narrative norms. That revelation inspired her to dive deeper into her own emotions and experiences through music, a quality that would become central to her signature style. In that sense, Dylan played a key role in unlocking a new creative path for her. But by the 1970s, their dynamic had shifted, and Mitchell's view of Dylan took a harsh turn. Her criticisms grew increasingly severe, eventually becoming some of the sharpest remarks ever aimed at the iconic songwriter. "We are like night and day, Dylan and I," she once remarked. In a particularly brutal dismissal, she said, "Bob is not authentic at all. He's a plagiarist. His name and his voice are fake. Everything about Bob is a deception." To call Bob Dylan, a man revered as rock's poet laureate, a fraud is a jaw-dropping accusation. But Mitchell didn't hold back. Over the years, she continued to chip away at Dylan's legacy, insisting that much of his creative success came from imitation rather than originality. In a 2013 interview, she took it a step further, attacking not only his authenticity, but also his musical skills. Musically, Dylan's not very gifted. He borrowed his voice from old hillbillies. He's got a lot of borrowed things. He's not a great guitar player. He invented a character to deliver his songs. It's a kind of mask. Her most personal jab came with a comment loaded with contempt. "I hated sharing a microphone with him because he had rotten breath." To be fair, Mitchell's critique isn't entirely without basis. Dylan has long been known for his chameleon-like approach to identity, constantly reinventing himself. From earnest folk troubadour to electric rebel, from country crooner to devout Christian. His work has always carried an element of theater, blurring the lines between the man and the myth. His voice, too, has always polarized listeners. Gravelly, nasal, and far from conventionally pretty, some see it as raw and emotionally expressive, while others call it an affected imitation of Southern bluesmen. Ironically, Mitchell's own public identity isn't without its own stagecraft. Born Roberta Joan Anderson, she adopted the name Joni Mitchell as her professional moniker. While this doesn't compare to Dylan's frequent reinventions, it still reveals that even she crafted an image for public consumption. Nevertheless, Mitchell views herself as fully authentic, someone who shares her soul in her music without filters or disguises. Whether this self-perception is completely accurate or not, it helps explain her distaste for Dylan's shape-shifting persona. Her criticism is rooted in a broader frustration with the music industry's drift away from authenticity. She's long refused to conform to commercial expectations, and her disdain for Dylan stems from that same unbending dedication to artistic honesty. In her eyes, while she pours unfiltered emotion into her music, Dylan hides behind personas. When it comes to Madonna, Mitchell's criticisms are even more scathing and even more direct. Her issues with the pop icon aren't just personal. They're emblematic of her overall disappointment with what she sees as the decline of artistic depth in favor of commercial spectacle. To Mitchell, Madonna represents the worst aspects of modern music: style over substance, image over authenticity. Her disillusionment began with the rise of music videos. "Music has become burlesque," she once said, blaming the video medium for shifting focus from sound to spectacle. While MTV and visual storytelling redefined how music was consumed, Mitchell felt this change prioritized flash and marketability over genuine talent and craftsmanship. In her view, artists became more focused on shock value than meaningful connection. Madonna, as one of the most visible figures in this shift, became an obvious target. Mitchell pulled no punches, once describing her as a living Barbie doll, but a little bit on the blue side. The phrase "expletive Madonna," as originally phrased, was particularly charged. Not only did it mock Madonna's name, but it evoked the Madonna whore complex, the tendency to label women as either pure and virtuous or overtly sexual and shameful. According to Mitchell, Madonna managed to combine both personas into one, packaging female sexuality in a way designed to please the male gaze while pretending to empower women. Calling her a living Barbie doll emphasized the idea of artificial beauty, of a carefully crafted, surface-level femininity lacking genuine depth. The comment about being a little bit on the blue side hinted at Madonna's provocative edge, suggesting that her image was tailored more to titillate than to inspire. But Mitchell's criticisms didn't stop at image. She took aim at the broader influence Madonna wielded, saying, "There's always been that type of female. There's always been a market for it. But the danger is that she thinks she's a role model. And it's a terrible role model. It's death to all things real." At this point, Mitchell's critique transforms from disdainful to deeply alarmed. Her concern wasn't just that Madonna existed, but that she had become a symbol of aspiration for a generation. To Mitchell, this wasn't just about personal taste. It was about a loss of artistic truth. Declaring Madonna's cultural impact as death to all things real was her way of warning that artistry had been replaced by branding, introspection replaced by spectacle, and depth drowned out by shallowness. The role models of previous generations, musicians who bared their souls, were being replaced by savvy entertainers, more skilled in attention-grabbing than in authentic creation. In Mitchell's opinion, the industry had traded heart for hype. Of course, not everyone shares her view. Madonna's supporters argue that she shattered boundaries, championed female empowerment, and redefined what women in music could achieve. Her continual reinvention and control over her narrative have inspired millions. Many see her as bold, unapologetic, and a trailblazer who has remained relevant across decades, something even Mitchell hasn't matched at the same scale. So, what do you think of the stars Joni Mitchell has criticized? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.